How's it going, everybody? In this video, we're going to be talking about some essential things that new gun owners should know. So if you're a new gun owner or you're new to this channel, welcome. We're glad to have you. Go ahead and hit that subscribe button and the notification bell. So my goal with this video is to give some essential knowledge to kind of educate the new gun owners, someone who may have went out and bought a firearm, purchased some sort of firearm in relation to what's going on right now with the virus. So individuals like you or someone you might know may not know really a lot of these things that we're going to discuss today, a lot of the terminology, some of the legal stuff. And so my goal with this video is to kind of be a broad brush and give a lot of knowledge and help you catch up if you're just coming to the Second Amendment, if you're just coming to the firearms culture for the first time. So first and foremost, the thing that I think is the most important thing for a new gun owner to know, and that I put on top of the priority to educate you on, and this is the 5 essential safety rules that relate to firearms. So what are the 5 firearm safety rules? So rule number 1 is to treat every gun as if it is loaded. Rule number 2 is to always point a firearm in the safe direction. Number 3 is to never point the gun at something that you don't intend to shoot or destroy. Number 4 is to always keep your finger off the trigger until you are ready and prepared to shoot. And number 5 is always to be aware of what the backstop or what is behind what you're intending to shoot. So sticking to these 5 firearm safety rules will really help keep you safe, but it'll also help you blend to the firearms culture, the Second Amendment culture a lot better. For example, if I go into a gun store and I see someone who has their finger on the trigger when they're looking at guns, they're flagging people, stuff like that, it makes it very evident to me that this person doesn't know a whole lot about firearms. They're not very aware of firearms, the culture around it, and the essential safety rules. And I know I can't trust this person with a firearm around me because they can't even stick to the basic essential safety rules. So now let's pivot away from the safety rules into some essential terminology that someone entering into the firearms culture, getting their gun for the first time, should know. So first and foremost, I think the one we need to address is the AR-15. We see the AR-15, the phrase AR-15 thrown a lot around in media, on the internet, stuff like that. It is a big buzzword, AR-15. And if you've never had a firearm before, you may think that an AR-15 stands for an assault rifle, because a lot of the times in the media they refer to an AR-15 as an assault rifle. But in fact, an AR-15 does not stand for assault rifle. AR actually stands for Armalite. And Armalite was the company that first manufactured this type of rifle. And it was manufactured in the 1950s. And therefore it is named after that manufacturer, the Armalite. So here I have one of my AR-15s, one of my rifles. This is actually a California compliant rifle. So if you're watching this video and you're not in the state of California, the reason why I have this stupid fin grip on here, and the reason why I have it set up like this, is because we have specific rules in the state of California, and it makes it really hard for us to have these type of rifles. And so this is what's considered a California compliant rifle. This is a featureless rifle. This is just an AR-15. It's just a normal rifle. It has specific configurations the way I like it. And also this is a California compliant rifle. But this is not an assault rifle. This is not a machine gun. It is nothing like that. It's just another rifle. And in this category, sometimes you will also hear an AR-15 referred to as a modern sporting rifle. Now, I don't like to call them modern sporting rifles. That's just another terminology that people in the gun culture have created to try to get away from the AR-15 language. But me personally, I think you should just call them an AR-15. That is what they are. That is what the firearm is. That is what the rifle is. It doesn't stand for assault rifle. The AR-15 is what the gun is, and I think we should call it that instead of a modern sporting rifle. And so another critical thing is an AR-15 is not a machine gun. A lot of the times you hear people refer to an AR-15 as a machine gun. That is incorrect. The typical AR-15, like the one I have, is a semi-automatic rifle, meaning that when you pull the trigger once, one round comes out. So a machine gun or a fully automatic rifle is a rifle or a firearm that when you pull the trigger and hold it down, it continues to fire a round. It continues to fire ammunition. The typical AR-15 that you hear talked about in the media and the one that you usually buy over the counter does not fall in that category. It is a semi-automatic rifle. It fires one round every time you pull the trigger. So what are machine guns? There are machine guns, but they are very, very, very hard to get because they are regulated by the NFA, the National Firearms Act. And essentially, under the NFA, any type of firearm that is fully automatic that was created after 1986, you cannot get anymore. You are not allowed to have those. Private individuals like me and you cannot have those type of firearms. And so that means really the market for machine guns or fully automatic rifles are only those firearms that existed prior to 1986. So that's a limited amount of firearms. And also, to be able to even get your hands on them, you have to go through the ATF and a long process, a tax stamp, stuff like that. It's very expensive to get your hands on these types of firearms. And so pretty much almost nobody has them. I don't know anybody personally that has any type of firearm that falls under this category of machine gun. So if you ever hear anybody refer to an AR-15 as a machine gun or a fully automatic rifle or anything like that, that is an incorrect statement. The AR-15 does not fall into that category. Now, the next major one that really bugs a lot of us individuals who are into firearms is when individuals refer to a magazine as a clip. So these are not clips. These are magazines. So there are some firearms that take clips, but the majority of firearms that are referenced or talked about take magazines like this PMag and like this standard Glock mag. So make sure when you're talking about these items, you refer to them as magazines, not clips. Also along these lines of talking about magazines, these are what are considered standard capacity magazines. Now, there's a little bit of nuance in this discussion because, like, for example, I'm in the state of California, and there are some legal definitions about what exactly these magazines are. But generally, the way you want to refer to them is as standard capacity magazines. And what that means is these type of magazines are the standard capacity, they're the standard round amount that come with these types of firearms. For example, a Glock 19, like what I have, traditionally comes with a standard magazine with 15 rounds. So therefore, you should refer to them as standard capacity magazines because these are the type of magazines that come standard with these types of firearms. So again, we're going to turn to some buzzwords in the media, and some people who are not, friends of the Second Amendment, are not friends of firearms. They like to refer to these as high capacity magazines or large capacity magazines. And that is an incorrect statement because these are just standard capacity magazines. These are the type of magazines that come with these types of firearms. Now, I referenced earlier that there's some nuance, specifically like for me when we're in the state of California, because the state of California actually defines legally these type of magazines as large capacity magazines. There is a statute in the state of California which defines these type of magazines as large capacity magazines, meaning any magazine which has the capacity to take more than 10 rounds. So technically in California, the legal definition of any magazine that has more than 10 rounds is a large capacity magazine. And in the state of California and in some other states, you are not allowed to have these standard capacity magazines because the state of California says that they are dangerous and that they are large capacity magazines that you are not allowed to have. And so if you're interested in why I have these 30-round standard magazines here in the state of California, even though California generally prohibits them, go ahead and click the card up here. And what that video covers is here in the state of California, we had a case which was decided, Duncan v. Bessaria, which led to Freedom Week. And during that period, residents in the state of California could buy these standard capacity magazines, but generally you should refer to these as standard capacity magazines. And really the only time you should ever really talk about a large magazine or a high capacity magazine is, for example, if you have an AR-15 and you have a drum magazine with 100 rounds, maybe you can consider that a large capacity magazine because it doesn't come standard with an AR-15, but still, I don't even like that terminology. I don't think we should really refer to them as standard high or low or large capacity. They should just be a magazine. This is just a magazine. And so another, buzzword and hot topic I want to talk about and terminology I want to talk about is bump stocks. As a lot of you know, this is another, term or item that is highly publicized, is in the media a lot. Essentially, a bump stock is just an aftermarket item that uses the recoil of the rifle to help assist fire that rifle faster. It doesn't make the rifle a machine gun, and essentially the rifle is still firing semi-automatic, but it's just firing at a faster rate. And a lot of people say, well, a bump stock helps you fire faster than you ever could. And to that I say, if you're not aware of Jerry Miculek and you're new to guns, check out Jerry Miculek and tell me that a bump stock helps you fire faster than someone. Jerry Miculek says, hold my beer. And so I want to talk about this one also because it is another buzzword. It pops up here and there, and it's just like bump stocks or an AR-15, stuff like that. You hear it come up a lot, and that is silencers versus suppressors. Now, a lot of people get nitpicky about silencers versus suppressors, but in my opinion, it's essentially the same thing, but there is a little bit of technicality to these two terminologies. A lot of times they're used interchangeably, but some people get nuanced about it. They don't like calling specific things silencers and they say you should call them suppressors because these type of items don't actually silence the firearm or the shot of the firearm. And yes, that is correct, but there is a little bit more nuance to that because calling them a silencer is not technically incorrect because a silencer is what these items were called in the original patent. Now, these items don't silence a gunshot. They don't make it absolutely quiet where you can't hear them. It's not like in the movies. And really, they just are a sound suppressor. And so that's why a lot of people prefer the sound suppressor language. But in reality, they're interchangeable. It's kind of this nuance of calling something an automobile, which may be the original patent language, versus a car. The next thing I want to talk about is some cultural terms, some terms you may hear come up, when you're on Second Amendment forums or firearms forums. If you're on Reddit, you're on YouTube, you're in my comment sections, you might see these terms pop up. So the first term is a kind of a derogatory term, and it's used to specific types of gun owners, and it is a FUD. So you don't really ever want to be called a FUD. So essentially a FUD comes from Elmer Fudd. They're pretty much calling you an Elmer Fudd. And what this means is you are a casual gun owner. You are someone who really doesn't believe in the Second Amendment. You only care about your hunting rifles. You only care about your shotgun. And you think anyone who has, these type of AR-15 rifles or any type of firearm that can't be used for hunting is not protected by the Second Amendment. So really a FUD is a derogatory term, and you don't want to be called a FUD. So another term you might hear come up, or you might see come up like on Reddit forums and stuff like that, are alphabet boys. So a lot of times you'll see memes or posts talking about alphabet boys coming to get your firearms or confiscate your firearms. So alphabet boys are really just individuals or law enforcement officers who are associated with the ATF, the CIA, the FBI. So as you can see, that's why they're called alphabet boys, because they are associated with those government agencies who are traditionally and typically trying to infringe on our Second Amendment rights. So the next, cultural terminology is going to be boogaloo. And so boogaloo pops up a lot right now, especially with the virus and a lot of the civil unrest. And what boogaloo means is essentially it's a hidden way to say like a revolution, a civil war type of thing, civil unrest. So essentially the terminology boogaloo is just used as a hidden way to talk about these type of actions being taken by patriots in America. So one of the last category things that I want to talk about, and I think you should be educated about as a new gun owner, is some of these legal, aspects and, carve outs and cutouts of the Second Amendment. So first and foremost, let's look at one of the traditional legal arguments against the Second Amendment or your right to own firearms like an AR-15. So first, a lot of the times what you hear, from specific individuals that are leaning left who don't believe in the Second Amendment is they say the Second Amendment does not cover an individual's right to own firearms. Instead, it only applies to the militia's ability to own and have firearms. And a lot of people against the Second Amendment kind of use this as their foundation argument, when in fact, legally, this type of argument has been completely obliterated. It has no merit anymore. It has no weight. The Supreme Court has said that individuals like me and you, residents, citizens of the US, have a right to firearms. It is not exclusive to just the militia. And specifically, the Supreme Court in this case said that me and you as individuals have a right to these firearms to protect ourselves. So if you're a new gun owner and you have heard for a long time that the Second Amendment only applies to the militia, that is incorrect. People who are still using that argument as their main foundation argument are incorrect. That type of argument has been already shot down at the highest level of our justice system. So another thing I want to look at is background checks. A lot of times in the media you hear, background checks thrown around a lot, that we need background checks, that people are purchasing firearms without background checks. So that's an incorrect statement, because in every state in the US, we have background checks. To purchase a firearm, say if I go to an FFL, if I go to a dealer and I want to purchase, let's say a Glock 19 over the counter from the gun dealer, I have to go through a background check. Now here in the state of California, that background check is ran, it goes to the federal system, it goes through the DOJ, all that stuff, and then it comes back to the gun store, and then I have to, here in the state of California, wait 10 days to take possession of that firearm. Some other states, like when I was in the state of Pennsylvania, they ran my background check. It really only took me about 30 minutes, and then I was able to take the firearm home with me that day. But every state runs a background check. And then along with that, what you hear a lot of the times is people will say, well, what about gun show loopholes? The gun show loophole that you hear said all the time. And really what the gun show loophole is and what people are referring to are really just private party transfers. And so what private party transfers are, in some states, you do not have to go through a background check if you are buying a firearm personally from one individual to yourself. If it is two private parties that are doing the transaction, you don't have to go through a background check. And that's in some states. For example, here in the state of California, we can't do that. If you would do a private party transfer, it still has to go through an FFL and has to go through all the processes. But there are some states where you don't have to do that, where they have said if it is a person-to-person transaction, it doesn't have to go through the traditional process. But if you were to go to a gun show and you wanted to purchase from an actual dealer, you would have to go through the traditional process. It is not a private party transfer. It is actually, a dealer transfer to an individual, and you have to go through the process. So it's disingenuous to say, like, at gun shows there are no background checks, because that is not factually correct. So as you can see with a lot of these languages, terminologies, legal aspects, things that have popped up and you see pop up a lot in the media, on forums, stuff like that, there is a lot of incorrect, information that is out there, and there is a lot of bending of the truth. So hopefully this video gave you some understanding, some background knowledge, especially if you're coming into firearms, into the culture, into the Second Amendment for the first time, and you're being introduced to these topics for the first time. Hopefully this helped clear up some of your questions. Also, if there were some topics that I didn't cover in here, some terminology, things that you think would be beneficial to new gun owners, go ahead and write that in the comment section. If you found this video helpful, or you found this video helpful in general, the best way to support the channel, to support this content and help me continue to put out information, is to join the Patreon page, and I'll put a link down to my Patreon in the details. Another way you can support the channel is using the various affiliate links down in the details as well. So as always, thank you guys for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And never forget, a nation that draws a great distinction between its scholars and its warriors will have its laws written by cowards and its wars by fools.